And now for a session presented by Oracle Hospitality, please welcome the Vice President at Nor1, Jason Bryant, and Managing Director at Starwood Capital, Rob Tanenbaum, in discussion with SkiftX Research Editor, Dan Marcec.
All right, well, thanks for joining us, Jason, Rob. I'm really happy to have you guys here. One of the reasons that we're here is something I'm very excited about. We've got a research report coming out with Oracle Hospitality here in a few weeks, and we're focused on what the hotel experience is going to look like in 2025. Obviously, a big topic. So we're looking at technology, of course, how labor models and service models are shifting, and more particularly, how we're starting to use automation and AI to create better guest experiences and drive revenue. And so as the session title suggests, that's what we're here to talk about. One of the really interesting findings that we had, we surveyed about 5,000 consumers and about 600 hoteliers around the world. And about half of the consumers said that they don't feel like they use all the amenities that they're paying for in their rates. And at the same time, actually about half of hoteliers also said that they expect non-room revenues to be a bigger part of their business in the next 3 years. So these things are coming together. In fact, there was twice the number of hoteliers that said the same thing the year before. So this is becoming a bigger deal in the industry, talking about how we have these kind of creative revenue opportunities. Quickly, I'm going to address the elephant in the room. Unbundling is a thing that this is leading to. It's a trend that we're talking about. We're not going to sit here and talk about how the hotel industry should unbundle like airlines. That's not what we're doing here today. But Jason, I did want to start with you and talk about what are some of the attributes and some of the revenue opportunities that we're seeing that hoteliers can start to think about that maybe they hadn't thought about in the past.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you and the Skift team. Had a really good experience so far. And I think the outcome of the report has borne that out, right? And you hit a stat there that I'd like to focus on. The 50% of guests or consumers don't avail themselves of the amenities presented to them. And I think there's lots of reasons for that. But one that I believe is that there's been a commoditization by the hotels, even the way that they handle their loyalty guests, right? So yes, there may be a differentiation to those loyalty guests, but once inside that tier, it's pretty much a commoditization. And I think that's where the opportunity lies. I mean, so to answer the question about the attributes, I could go through the laundry list. Actually, the report itself lists things we all know, view and size of room, and I think that's sort of obvious. That the key though is, for a particular property, for a particular segment of guests, how do you weight those, right? What is the 2 or 3 amenities for that particular hotel that are going to drive the most revenue? How do you price those? How do you execute on that? And so building a strategy is what's important. Right, and we're talking about this at a high level, but Rob, from the operator perspective, where are you seeing some examples of, when you look at hotel to hotel, the opportunities there, and what's going right in terms of how you're positioning those?
Right. So I think the importance is really about engagement. It's engaging with the guests, and it starts at the moment that they're at check-in. And it's telling guests about what's available at the hotel, what's available to them. Too often or not, we don't tell them. And so, majority of the time, they don't take advantage of any of the opportunities available to them there. So it could be as simple as upon check-in, you say to the guest, it looks like you had a really long day. We've got an amazing Wagyu burger with sweet potato fries in our dining room. Why don't you enjoy them? Or we have an incredible whiskey offering, and our bartender would love to pour you and show you and explain to you what's available. All of a sudden, I'm engaged, I'm interested in it. But it could also be as simple as the fact, what's the history of the property? And by engaging about the history of the property, like last night, I stayed in a hotel that was over 100 years old. It had so much going for it, but no one told me about it. And so they lost the opportunity for having me stay in the hotel, engage in their restaurants, and really drive revenue.
Yeah. So, so this is really easy, right? You just get somebody at the front desk, make a list of things that are important or unique about the hotel, and you move on, right? But really, we're here to talk about technology. And so, Jason, how do hotels start to figure out what are these attributes that work for me? It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. We can talk about these. These are all awesome examples, but that's not going to be true at every hotel. So how do we start to get into that?
Yeah, I guess what we see is it's just basically where what we encourage the properties that we have the most success with. It's where they embrace the technology. I mean, it's so much to take off, Robert, your point, which is, you can build the greatest technology in the world, but if they don't use it, well, yeah, you're not going to get results out of it. And so, it's those organizations that embrace that and then encourage their teams to continue to embrace that. And how do they work together with the technology as a tool or, as a weapon, to create competitive advantage, right, and to create engagement.
Right. And what are some of the tactics, I guess, when you're talking about like making it, creating a test, figuring out, like where there's risk reward, obviously, right?
I'll take it.
And then Rob, you can answer as well. I'd like to hear from your perspective.
Yeah, I think you kind of quickly get into like when we start thinking about like the tactics of, what offer do we make, what price do we make, do we make that offer at, when do we make it, right? Those dimensions, when coupled with that it needs to happen real time, right? Where you're intersecting, the reservation with information about the guest, with an inventory set, right? Like that is ideally suited for an AI platform or machine learning platform. Like that's the only way we would know to do it. And so ideally what you want to be able to do from the hotelier's perspective is those tactical decisions should be made by that platform, right? Because that's what computers are really good at, right? Tactical, real time, discern a lot of information very quickly. But then what computers aren't that good at is strategy. Right? And that's where the humans need to be layered into this. And that's what, my belief is that property should be focusing on is, for your loyalty plan or your loyalty program, what's the right strategy, your revenue management strategy. Your own individual property has its own strategy, how it's serving the guests. So that's the direction I would advocate.
Yeah, absolutely. And so then how can we use this technology to complement the strategy with the tactics and where I think one of the things is, you already mentioned it, talking about when they come to the front desk, they may be able to offer. When do we start offering these kind of things? Like at what points in the journey do we start to say, okay, well, I know what attributes I have, I know what's important, I know what we want to offer, but then how do we know when to give that opportunity to the guests?
Sure, so QR codes are great, right?
Yeah.
You could change pricing by day of the week, by hour, time of day, which is fantastic. However, where QR codes are not great is the fact that we've stopped the idea of service and engagement. And so as a food server, at a restaurant, you could sell me an appetizer, entree, and dessert instantly through engagement. However, what we've done now with the QR code is we become order takers. And so we've lost that art of engagement, which is where the opportunity ahead of us lies.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Obviously, the last 2 years, some of it's been out of necessity. This, again, I'll do another plug for the report. A lot of the things that we're looking at is, we see these technologies that have been around for a while. It's the contactless, the QR codes were popular in like 2008 or whatever, and then they went away for a long time, and now they're back. And there are all these great applications for it, but you're right, there's that balance. And so, what are some of the ways that we're seeing these technologies complement that engagement and personal experience? Jason, you want to take that?
Sure. So one, just to take off of this, which is, it's definitely an and question, which is, it's not, is it human interaction or technology?
Right.
Right. And I think that's, to your point, Rob, I think a lot of, sort of the industry, especially now with the labor shortage and issues, there's kind of this just, let's just throw it over to the technology and let it do its thing. But that's not really how it's going to be optimized. Like the optimization is going to be by how do you combine the human and the machine. Like a good example, you mentioned the front desk, right? So when the guest walks up there, what should occur, right, is what is the right offer for this guest? What's based on inventory? What's the right price of that offer? And then what the agent can do is, so they're empowered with that information, but then what they do is focus on serving the guest.
Right.
They focus on, I would say, also gathering data points. There's no way that we can gather the sort of intent and different things, and that's the ideal sort of combination of the two, the human and the machine.
Right. And are you seeing examples of that type of mix working and from the operator perspective?
Absolutely. I mean, experiential travel is so important today, and we really need to be thinking about what are we offering our guests. For example, like Westin Hotels offers a 3-mile run through the city. And if you think about it, a way to generate additional revenue, if you had that as an evening run, where do you end up at? You end up at the bar, and you offer complimentary beverage. Well, most likely you're going to have more than one beverage. And so you're engaging your hotel guests with other guests and having further engagement about the property. Thinking about utilizing a bourbon bar program, a cooking class, depending upon the day of the week. And the other part too that's most important is what's the connection with the local community? You can't overstate the importance of that. And so we really need to be, if you had 1 hour of free time, how would you connect with the local community? And it could even be something as simple as giving back. And that's, paying it forward is so important in our industry, and I think we can further drive engagement through that method.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You're talking about loyalty programs and kind of sometimes, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but sometimes they can be a little bit one-size-fits-all type of thing. But we saw in our report data, you mentioned the giving back thing. We asked a question about whether or not it would induce someone to join a loyalty program if they could earn points for like giving back to their community, sustainability, things like that. And it was over 50% of consumers said they would do that. Granted, when you get into it on the day-to-day, you're not really sure if that's what they're actually going to do. But there's a lot of interest for these creative opportunities. Just dig a little bit deeper than just, okay, well, yeah, I know I can make a little bit more money if I allow a guest to choose their room or choose their view. You should do that, definitely. I think everybody probably should be doing that. But then you get into these individual opportunities on a hotel-to-hotel basis, and it just opens the door.
Absolutely.
I was going to say one other thing about that personalization, but I think ultimately it comes back to how does this all work into the revenue mix? How do we see this coming across as part of the overall strategy? Is it going to be the number one thing? Is it number two? Like, how do hoteliers have to change their mindset? Jason, you want to take that?
Yeah, I think at Oracle and certainly at Norone prior to that, I mean, our almost maniacal focus is on revenue. That's the objective function of all the offers we make and all the, I would say, investment we've made in technology. But it's tied directly to, because we know that by doing that, you're focusing on conversion, you inherently are satisfying the guest. Right? You very quickly are understanding which offers are being accepted. What is their willingness to pay, right? And that thing is, that's what we've, let's say, proven out over the years, which is guests are very willing to pay. Actually, their willingness to pay is significantly larger than what we believe they are across the reservation life cycle.
Right.
It's just being able to, again, to engage them in the proper way. And you asked earlier was like when to engage the guests. I mean, should be right from the very beginning at their booking. You take that information as you learn about the guest in that same reservation. You take that information, and then it continues to progress all the way to the front desk. And so, again, like engaging them throughout the entire reservation life cycle in order to optimize revenue, you're also satisfying the guest.
Right, exactly.
So like last night, for example, I checked into a hotel and they had a kiosk. Well, throughout the reservation process, at the end it said go to the front desk. I'm like, okay, well that completely eliminates the process of the kiosk. But what would have been really interesting is if they had the front desk agent working the kiosk in partnership with myself, and therefore they could have, and if they had upsell packages available, really could have driven not only engagement, but a positive experience and then additional revenue on top of that.
Absolutely, and it is, talking about across the entire journey, you have so much opportunity to learn about people, and like guests are becoming so much more comfortable with the idea of artificial intelligence because they're not scared off by it when they can see the value that they're getting back. And Rob, your experience is exactly right on. It's not a replacement, it's an additive thing. So, well, we're out of time, but once again, I've been plugging this report. Obviously I'm biased, I'm writing it. But please scan the QR code. You can get sign up to download it, and you'll get an early copy when it comes out in a couple weeks. So, Jason, Rob, thanks for your time.
Thank you.